Go ahead.
I was going to say, so we've already got kind of the Iowa going. It's been a while since we've talked to you last, and it was a big 4th of July kind of recruitment going on there with Darion Jones and the recruitment that he obviously committed outside of Nebraska, went and chose the Hawkeyes. What was kind of your vibe from that? We had talked about it on the show. I know DB has more of a little bit of an inside source on there too, and kind of knew that this would go one way or the other, but the split household now. Did you get anything from that, or was it truthfully just it kind of felt like it was going to be Iowa the entire time?
It didn't feel like Iowa the entire time to me. There was a point several months back where I put in a crystal ball for Nebraska just because I thought, the brother thing will win out. And, obviously Donovan's had a good start to his career in Lincoln. So I thought that connection might carry it. But about a month or so prior to the 4th, somewhere around there, you began to hear stuff we did in, our network that Iowa really had done a nice job with them, hit it out of the park. And he was probably leaning that way. So by the time we actually got to the holiday, I wasn't surprised he did it. I haven't talked to him directly very much. So I'd be speaking out of turn to say all the reasons why he picked Iowa. But I just think we're living in a time where, guys have a pretty open mind about places they could go. It's not just like, this is my home state, I'm necessarily going there. And sometimes when you have family at a place, it doesn't mean you don't love your family, but you kind of like your own little spot to do your own thing. And I could totally understand that line of thinking. So I think he's a really good player. I think a lot of Donovan and what he can still do as a Husker. And I've heard nothing but positive things from the North High community about Darien having as much athleticism, to match his brother. So I think the Hawkeyes got a really good one in that case.
Mm-hmm. BC, do you find, I know that as we kind of get down further this road, some Nebraska fans are pretty uncomfortable, and Coach Rhule's addressed this at certain aspects, but how much credence do you find in the concern that Nebraska fans have over the fact that Nebraska really didn't land any of the top recruits in the state this year?
I really think, after covering the beat for a couple decades, that thing is very, I don't know, it fluctuates quite a bit. I've done it enough where there will be a year like this or a cycle where they get one guy or no guys, and there's sort of this storyline that travels around until the next one. What's going on? Why don't they have those connections? And no matter the staff, there's always been sometimes a bounce back or a year then when suddenly there's 4 or 5 guys. And so right now, especially with this staff, which I think does pay a lot of attention to the in-state recruiting and I think cares a lot about it, they just don't want to offer just to offer. That's the thing. They don't want to just throw something out if they can't back it up when it comes to you can actually sign here. They have, as we've discussed on the show, Ravi, they have more limited numbers in this class, so they were going to have to be a little bit more choosy with who they went after. Then sort of they had I guess you'd say, unique quarterback situation sort of in the next 2 cycles that developed in the way it happened. And so that took them out of the running of maybe a high profile in-state QB, which would have, of course, been a splash headline and maybe changed the narrative a bit. So I think a bunch of things kind of just butted heads in this case and led to why it is the way it is. But I don't view it as a concern point. I really don't. I would if I got the signs that the staff weren't really scouting the local guys well and had a lot of respect for them. But I just don't think that's the case. I think they have a ton of respect for guys.
BC, thank you for rejoining us. Apologize for the technical difficulties here. I believe you were wrapping up your explanation on kind of the in-state recruiting and how outside of Jace Reynolds, Nebraska's sort of just had a weird confluence of events that you believe has led to the lack of in-state commits right now.
Yeah, just to shorten it up and summarize, I think they're putting in the work locally about really looking at what type of talent is out there, paying respect to it. It's just a smaller class, and it's A couple different things have made it work out as it has, but I don't see it as a concern point.
Okay, so BC, is there a part in this year's cycle that Nebraska has not went after some of the top name recruits? Obviously the Jet Tamalas, they did try to make that pitch for Darion Jones, and they've likely had conversations with some of those, that the relationships that they have built in this class, does that maybe detract from future classes? Do you see it that way? Or how does a recruiting cycle go when you don't pick up a lot of the Omaha or the top state talent, that then in future classes that doesn't hinder you later on?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's worth pondering, but I also think there's enough guys from just the recent classes that are like freshmen or redshirt freshmen now. I just wrote about Caleb Benning as one example. If you get Caleb out there and he's contributing and Donovan's contributing, and you've got Christian Jones and Pierce Mooberry guys coming up, and even Gage Stenger from a few classes ago is going to be, I think, one of the leaders on this team. I'm not sure what exactly his role is, but I think he'll at least be important on special teams. Name a bunch of them. You can name 8, 9 of those guys. And if they're producing in some respect this year, I honestly think that will be a bigger factor than a lot of kids oh, wait, you guys only signed one kid from the state last year. I don't know about this. I think that's going to carry more weight, the guys actually getting it done on the field that are in-state guys that really aren't far removed from their high school days either.
Mm. Speaking of guys that aren't actually that far removed from playing days, Nebraska added a recruiting staffer. I think yesterday was official. I don't know if it was officially announced, but it was announced on his Twitter. Anthony Johnson, who has had a super interesting path to get to Nebraska. I guess, how much do you know about Anthony Johnson and how he got here?
I don't know a lot about him, but yeah, he was with another Big Ten program, and the thing about Rhule, when you look at how he puts his staff together, he's always looking for young up and comers or guys that are hungry, and they can come from anywhere and from any background, and he's not shy about giving guys chances. If he feels there's a connection, or if one of his staff members has a connection with somebody. So I never get surprised when some name pops up, that he's joining. And the thing is, I think they give those guys opportunities, whatever his role is. He'll have a niche where he's expected to produce, and he'll get a chance to do something that matters in his program. I don't think they just have people come in and sit as dead weight. So if you get a position, even if it's not one of the main full-time assistants ones we always talk about, I think Rhule has proven that he gives opportunities for guys to climb up, or it can help their career go elsewhere. So I'm sure there's a lot of young coaches that honestly want to come work for him because they've seen his track record and how he does treat his young coaches.
BC, I was kind of curious, not about Anthony Johnson specifically, I guess, but he just joined Michigan a couple months ago. For these I believe they're full-time, but non-primary staff positions, how often, or I guess how common is this type of movement where whether it's kind of sort of in an off cycle of what we would consider the normal hiring time period, or these really quick moves? Do you have any frame of reference for how common or uncommon this type of thing is, going from one Big Ten school to another after a relatively short period of time?
Yeah, I don't know if I could give a great answer on it. It seems like guys usually spend at least one full year somewhere. You have that one season and whatever. So 6 months or whatever it was at Michigan is a shorter time. And I don't know all the details. Perhaps it's just a better deal, a slightly better opportunity. I do know, when Pat Stewart came in as the GM, there was talk of there could be some recruiting hires for some various things coming down the pike. So Nebraska was sort of looking to fill a position or two with their recruiting staff. And so, this makes sense in that respect. So it could have just been a deal in this case where, especially in our climate in college football, we're getting these GMs who have joined programs in the last 5 or 6 months, they're sort of looking at, okay, what's the staff like? What do I need? How could this guy fill this blank that maybe we're missing? And so that might be why you're seeing some of these hires of guys who have been at a place a shorter time than usual.
So BC, maybe not Anthony Johnson specific, because maybe his role, as you know, we're trying to figure out where it is. It sounds like it could be more on the recruitment side, kind of where he was with Michigan and potentially with Pittsburgh as well before then. Is that something that Nebraska prioritized in terms of maybe alleviating some time from the coaching staff having to go out and do this sort of recruitment? I think there is there a misperception that it's strictly the position coaches and the coordinators and Coach Rhule that go out and do all the recruitment, or is this maybe one of those guys that can start that recruitment process? Is that a part of, I guess, the recruitment process when it comes to Nebraska, is that it's not always the coach that has to go out, and maybe this is a new spot and a new name that recruits can kind of get in touch with before they get in touch with an EJ Barthel or whoever it would be?
Oh, absolutely. There's a lot of recruits that will interview, and like early on in the process, that they're talking to someone who's not necessarily a full-time coach. Or, there's several names that pop up. I mean, one that everyone knows is like Keith Williams. He's obviously got an important job, like within Nebraska's recruiting structure, has been important to Rhule's staff. So like his name would pop up, but there's others where it's someone who is not like an everyday staff name that we talk about on the radio usually, but he's reaching out on behalf of Nebraska, or he's the staff member that the kid kind of relates to first off as the ball sort of gets rolling. So that's not uncommon at all. And I'm not saying this is how it's going to go with Anthony Johnson by any means, but we are now in a different time where you can send like whatever staffers you want on the road, and so there is opportunity for guys who are really good recruiters or getting going in recruiting, and they have those connections to take some of the labor off coaches where they weren't always on the road. Now, of course, you're going to want a lot of your position coaches to eventually be out there, have face-to-face time. You're going to want like Terry Braden in front of guys because he's just so energetic and he's the D-line coach. But there is something to be said for early on in the early stages, other people helping. Well, obviously these position coaches are busy trying to get ready for a season and all this.
Talking with Brian Christopherson, Husker247. BC, as we're kind of getting ready for Big Ten Media Days, and we got the announcement yesterday that Fan Day and the Big Red Preview is going to be August 2nd. Where are some of the landmarks you're at as you're kind of, I feel like a lot of us are starting to get into our prep mode for football season. Where are you at in sort of your preparation, and how do you start to get ready now that we're, 6 weeks out from the start date?
Yeah, you start to, I think we're to the point where, we've kind of spun around in a circle on certain topics. And now it's like this week, I'm kind of forming like, okay, what are the 8 to 10 questions when you go to Las Vegas next Tuesday and Nebraska's at the mic, that push the ball forward? Like what is actually news or something new to the equation? And sometimes you're not going to get a new answer to those questions you ask. But I do think there's a lot of curiosity still. For like one instance is the O-line to me has been something we have talked about all offseason, and we're like, that could be a strength for good reason. We see that there's a lot of potential depth there. And yet there's a lot of curiosity about certain guys, like where you specifically put Latovsky, for instance, how some of the vets like Corcoran and Prohaska come back. Like I feel like sometimes we actually talk over guys like they're not going to be around in the fall, because they were out rehabbing, or a Gunnar Gatula type guy. And I'm curious, like what kind of impact can they make? Can one of those guys bump their way to the front of the line again? So you think about stuff like that, topics that maybe people have kind of put in the back burner in the spring, and now it's like, no, let's get to the bottom of this. Who's really like in the mix there at right tackle? And like you get your Demetrius Bell type stories, like where's he at? Could he pop in and be part of the equation at wide receiver? So there's Carter Nelson update. Like, is he ready to roll like we think he can be? All that stuff. Maybe it's kind of injury related, but those nuts and bolts items, I think, honestly, are the stuff that interests people the most. And then there's always like a name or two that pops up at either media days or the first week that's like you didn't necessarily consider that person was in the running for the 2 deep, but here he is, and you better pay attention. And so that's the sort of stuff you start to look out for, I think.
BC, other than probably the general what's going on in college football conversations that Rhule tries to put himself into just when he's out doing other media tours, when it comes to Big Ten Media Days next week, do you think that there's a specific message about this year's team that he will try to convey just generally over to the conference media? Because we know what we are getting from the national conversation kind of from him, what he's put into expectations even from last summer to this year. What is there something that maybe we're missing in the fold that we could expect to hear from him next week that might be the theme or maybe his message for the season?
I'm not sure. I don't want to put words in his mouth before he speaks them himself. I wonder, though, there's always this attempt, because it's been true, that Nebraska's sort of struggled in close games and stuff like that. And I wonder how much, like in a week like next week, we'll see if this happens. It might not. But you sort of move it forward like, this is a new squad. I like the mentality of the squad. We've been working at all these the 2-minute drill, red zone, all these various things to help us in those kind of games. We're not going to be a program that is a product or lives in the past of what happened last year or the year before follows this team. It's a new crew, and these are the reasons why I like this specific crew. I do think sometimes one of the things you have to fight at Nebraska, and I'm part of it, with how we cover it. And it's been true. Like, Nebraska sort of struggled in these close games getting over the hump. So there's always that, when's it going to happen? How's it going to happen narrative that's out there. I could see, though, where within the program, you kind of push that to the back burner and you'd be like, you got all these new guys like Dane Key, Isaiah Hunter, Deshaun McCullough on defense, Marquise Watson, Trent. That history isn't their history. And so I think sometimes at media days, a coach or players can kind of establish that mindset. Like, this is a new group. Let's go get it. This is why I like this team that I'm with right now. So I don't know if that'll be what comes out of next week, but that's a wild guess by me. But that's sort of how I would look at it if I were inside those walls. I'd kind of want to distance myself from all the circular narrative that sometimes goes on around here.